This is an opera called Abie's Chinese Rose, and we're having a read through here today. And I thought I'd start out saying a little bit about the background of this. And this is also, if not mainly, for the soloists, because there are some things that I think it may help to understand about it. So, first of all, let's start with Harbin. Harbin is a very large city in China that very few Americans have ever heard of. There are, in fact, 11 million people in it. In America, that would make it one of the largest cities. In China, it's about number 18. It is also the coldest large city in the world. It's about 200 miles south of Siberia. It's the most un-Chinese of large Chinese cities. It was, in fact, Russian until 1947. Well, why the opera? So, first of all, the reason for Harbin's existence is that it was the eastern terminus of the Trans-Siberian Railway, which the Tsar decided to build in the 1890s. And up to that point, it had been a tiny little fishing village. It's only about 50 miles from the Pacific Ocean and Port Arthur, which is one of the reasons why it's strategic. When the Tsar made this decision, he also decided that he needed a group of Europeans to come quickly to help to develop the area. And nobody in the eastern part of the empire particularly wanted to go to this frigid spot that can get down to minus 30 or below routinely in the winter. So we looked around, and you may know that there was a large group of Jews living in the western part of the empire, and they lived under terrible conditions. They were forced to live in designated areas. They were not citizens. They could not own land. They could not do businesses, and they were generally poor. The personal part of this connection is that most Jews in America came from there, as did Dr. Rebecca and myself 2 generations before, our relatives. At any rate, they did come, and they not only came, but they very quickly became community leaders. They engaged in development. They were entrepreneurial. They were extremely successful. They developed industries, and more to our purpose, they developed culture, and that culture included many kinds of institutions, among them a symphony orchestra, an opera company, and a conservatory, all of which still exists today, which makes it one of the oldest of those in the world. About 5 years ago, the Chinese government decided to build a new opera house. It's worth looking at it online sometime. The architecture is spectacular. Around this time last January, Rebecca and I went as guests of the Chinese People's Republic to Harbin, spent a wonderful week there. They were unbelievably fine hosts. 2 days of which were basically spent in negotiation with the Harbin Opera Company about the opera that I'd written for them. What you see, which is a work in progress, which is to say, we agreed that I would expand it. It was originally a 1-act chamber opera. It's now 2 acts with a prologue and an entr'acte. I'll come back to that in a moment. And then in order to allow us, and we hope them, to rehearse it, we did a piano reduction, which you see. Among their critiques are that the style that you see here is not necessarily my usual style. So what you see is my effort to try to synthesize several things. One is at least my conception of traditional Chinese music, which may have no relation to what a Chinese person would, which is why when you hear some of the accompaniment, which has been greatly reduced, almost out of existence, as you'll hear. A second thing that it reflects is expanding the focus not just on this love relationship, come back to that in a moment, but on the fact that the people of Harbin to this day are very proud of the fact that another way that the city is unique is probably the only large city in the world where anti-Semitism was never an issue. What happened, however, is the community expanded rapidly and remarkably. And by 1931, when the Japanese invaded, there were somewhere between 20 and 30,000 families. There are none today. Most of those who scattered, they were fortunate in not being placed in concentration camps, but most of them wound up in Shanghai in a ghetto during the war. Some dispersed to other places. And we heard a long history of this when we were there as well. All right. Now, specifically about the read-through that we're doing here today. This is not a performance. I appreciate your bearing with us. So I appreciate all of you doing this. I'll just say a word about each person, if I may. The bass at the end, Tyler Putnam, and his wife, Sarah Nardin, husband and wife. They've been very busy with their youngster this year. I sing all around the country and have very impressive recipes. Theo, who is our baritone, is distinguished in a number of ways, and among other things, on your website, I understand you do choreography.
I do, yes.
Well, it turns out you're in good company, because Brian McDonald, who's the tenor, does that as well, isn't that?
That's great.
And last and most important, Rachel Sandler, who is our soprano, who has a wonderful tape on her site, which when I listened to it blew me away. It left me in tears. It was just your senior recital. It was wonderful. And at the piano, Alan Mandel. Alan Mandel has graciously agreed to do that. Alan is my mentor. He is a wonderful concert pianist. I thought just a little bit about Alan and modern and contemporary music. He's been teaching me for a number of years. I finally found a 20th century composer that Alan hadn't met. That was very unusual. Almost nobody did. So without further ado, the way we're going to proceed here is the two things that I said that I've added in addition to expanding from one act to two act. One is a short prologue, which includes the tenor and the soprano, as you know. Then we will go directly from there to the first act. One of the things you'll notice, you see in places says an act two here and it says act two. Well, this is because there are things that still need to be straightened out about that. Last act is considerably shorter. Before we go into that, there's another short piece, an entr'acte, which is the family of the tenor meeting the soprano. The second part of the act is trying to convince, as you've seen, her family to support this, and they're not in favor of it, and that's why we have the Deus Ex Machina at the end, and the party leader who brings everybody together. The origin of this is only roughly, based on an early 20th century very popular musical in America called Abie's Irish Rose. Jewish boy meets Irish girls, they have to convince the families, and it was played around in various forms here for many, many decades. I have changed that obviously to Abie's Chinese Rose, but the idea is the same. All right, so without further ado, let us launch into our read-through here.
Stay still, you are supposed so passionately too. This is more than fancy, I can tell. I have never felt this way before, and I want to be your partner for life.
I cannot resist, I love you so, but I am one, you are yet a Jew.
We can face the world together, certainly.
First we have to win over our parents. I would not want to give up their regard. This will not be easy, of that I am sure.
I agree with you, but let us try. They will feel the warmth that we feel.
We would like to think that love conquers all. Sometimes folly turns out to be right. May it be thus ever and ever with us, and may glory reign over all. This city has survived the force of war. Our neighborhood is safe and sound again. Many of our citizens did fight. Some of them never did return.
Here at home we face deprivation. At best, it was hard to find food.
Our children had to help us as adults. There was no school to educate them then.
But our neighboring Jews and the worse, most of them were forced to flee Haben.
We feel terrible about this. They were important people in our town. I suppose it was us as well. Monstrosities is good in Berlin. Began with the Jews who brought it in. Jews helped make it great.
was comforted, knowing you would be there.
We could do no less for our friends. Your parents have given plenty to love. Good friends are friends for all time lives. Drink together, hold on to each other. Good friends are friends for all their lives. Drink together, hold on to each other.
Seasons of kings, greetings to you. Greetings and good morning to you. We are all of a kind, all of a kind. On our Jew, we love our peace. Let us hope the war does not recur. We have suffered enough for a generation. Let us hope the war does not recur. We suffer for a generation.
Mother, it is fortunate your friends had hid you well from the threat. We owe them our lives. I'm sure you know that's true. When others had to flee, you did stay.
Your parents have given us plenty to love. In their time, they were gracious to us.
The Han and Jews carry for each other. We remember those who had to flee. We shall preserve the treasure they gave us and rebuild the nation in the very same mode.
Father, mother, I have news for you.
Ever since you returned, I've been fine.
Mother, father, I have news for you. You know my chance to marry was delayed. Well, now I have met the girl I love, and she loves me back with all her heart.
I came for blessing. You will find her perfect. Do you know?
My son, how could you find a Jewish girl? I know of none eligible here, and the marriage broker left for Shanghai. How can you afford the bride price? Baby, I don't think your father understands. But he has met Rose and likes her.
Rose is the flower of my heart. She shines like the petals of the rose, and she is a person full of courage. She admires our people like her own, like her own. She will surround you with grace. She will render you veneration.
This was not a good feeling give. Rose is clearly not a Jewish woman.
Before we
Before we
helped
helped
our
our
neighbors,
and they in turn
appreciated us.
We
we suffered supporters of the cause. But we are not prepared to give up our son, to give up our son. You're right, Rose is not a Jewish girl, but she carries the spirit of her age. I cannot attest to her love of Jews. It's not just that she is hung. Although the people of her bid are kind, they think of Jews with all their due respect. We have done well. We have done so well. Let nothing come asunder now.
Yet traditional Judaism requires conversion in order to be wed. Is a Chinese girl willing to do that? The road is hard and takes a prolonged time.
Father, you must meet Rose and her parents. I would not impose conversion on her. However, I think she would agree to it. More important is that I love her.
What is this talk of love and sacrifice? I had not even met your father before the shotgun arranged for me to be married. We saw each other at first during the wedding. You may find our culture is similar. Traditionally, girls do not have a choice.
The war has changed everything we do. We highly respect Jewish tradition.
Give this notion of Avie's a minimum chance. He represents a long tradition of love. Mutual respect
me to meet my love. I'm going to wed her, that is a given. I hope that you will like her, at least come with me. To meet my love, I'm going to marry her.
We shall memorialize all of them, our children, and our children's children alike.
active among the people you know. And during the war, she nursed those in need. That was how we met when I was wounded. She was the one who changed my bandages. She was the one who tended to my sores. And she will be attentive to her in-laws. She honors the history of the Jews in Harbin.
What caused her in the public square? What you caught her in the public square?
Times change, people too, I have changed.
My head is spinning, trying not to take this in. He will take her for his wife and leave. They'll go away.
But you cannot live together. We would forbid, we cannot permit this to be. This is something bad that people don't do.
Times change, people change, and I have my head to spin.
What you quarter in the public square? This is something our people never do.
Baby, my head spins.
What have we here? Some of my favorite people are out.
Master Shu, you are our acknowledged leader. Perhaps you can intervene. Rose and I plan to marry.
He speaks for me too. We can marry right now.
You should understand that I truly love your daughter, and it's fair to say she loves me. How this came about I cannot say, but Rose and I will leave Harbin today.
What you quarter in public?
Fact of the marriage is set. I'm going to marry Rose.
I am going to marry him. My head does spin.
what have we here? Some of my favorite people are out quarreling.
True, you are our acknowledged leader. Perhaps you can intervene for us.
What is true? This man is stealing my daughter.
The woman has no rights to call her own.
I repeat, this is something our people don't do. Send my daughter away from me and take her to what city far from here. Let us do our best. So tell me, what can this young man do?
You know him a patriot. He fought the enemy during the war. In spirit he is on. It is true. In spirit he is on. In spirit he is on. In spirit he is on.
Bravely spoken, miss. But I asked him.
She speaks for me. Rose speaks for me. I am devoted, revolutionary. Wherever I am, I promote the cause. Here in Harbin, I lead an important cell.
Of course I know that. I was just testing him. My loyal supporters here say Abie is staunch. She aids the revolutionaries. Now come, I'm sure that once was true. But now comes the revolutionary spirit. Husbands and wives devote themselves. No sacrifice is too great. And you are of the last generation.
We should live to see our children free, and thousands of flowers blossom.
Here is what I am thinking to do. Education beckons to me and others.
Does this mean I lose my daughter?
away,
How can I accept this
and
land?
I need her ever by my
My
side.
daughter is subject to the wishes of her father. Stop! Stop!
We cannot all be satisfied. Wish our best for all whom you love.
be not afraid. China has existed for thousands of years. She will go on just fine in your absence. So come, let us all rejoice for them.
What part of Harbin is this? I do not know it.
This is where my love Rose does live. Most of the population is right here.
No Jewish person would have been about.
That is true, it is a different world. And now I see that Rose is coming near. Hello, my dearest, you are welcome to me. Rose is as good as her word that I promised.